Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War Hell and Hunt event, in which the Gate of Souls is added to Gems of War. So, this week we're getting quite a few new things, between a pet, a new mythic, a bounty event, and this thing, as well as, of course, the raid event. But as far as the Gate of Souls, not all of them are equal though, and Gate of Souls, not one of the viable ones, unfortunately. It is one in a series of various gate-related troops. There are several of them, like Dwarven Gate and Thorns, but this one's probably the absolute weakest of them for the most part. It gets to curse an enemy, then drains some life from them, based on basically half its magic plus a few, and then that's boosted based on souls, but it then just shifts it into armor. I was going to say that this would probably be somewhat okay if it actually did both a life gain and a armor gain with that, but apparently it just does the true damage and then gains the armor. So unfortunately it does not interact that way, and because it doesn't interact that way, it is pretty useless, especially compared to the other gates. I would not bother using this. Dwarven Gate is a common and the exact same mana. Well, it uses blue. This uses blue-red. But Dwarven Gate, you'd get more value out of it, and it's pretty similar as far as color and what it can do tank-wise. So overall, I would just completely ignore this troop, as it is pretty underwhelming, unfortunately, and will not really be usable under almost any context. Other than that, of course, for our weekly things, we have quite a bit of bonuses to the entirety of the Kingdom of Blighted Lands, which is really useful because a lot of events this week will be using it, mostly raids and the class event on Thursday. But we have 10% to all Blighted Lands, as well as 10% to all daemons, which is almost 20% to the entire kingdom. And while you wouldn't really be doing this much if you wanted to, you can get a 40 additional souls for putting the useless gate into your team, though I would not advise this compared to normal soul farming, as it is a relatively useless troop and will just be eating up a slot. As far as the event key drop table this week, we have ourselves Blighted Lands. So if we go over to Blighted Lands, we'll be able to see most of the drops that are capable this week. As far as the ones that are not capable, every single thing you see here, if you go under Blighted Lands and show all, is available with two exceptions. Doom of Flame can only be obtained through the Red Tower of Doom event, and the new troop that came into the raid, which we'll be going over in a moment, Lucifiria, can only be obtained this week through the raid event, and then it won't be available for another month. So those are the only two not in the drop table, and everything else you see here will be obtainable. Unfortunately, Blighted Lands, not that great of a kingdom. You need to go get it upgraded so you can get a +1 magic for it. This week it ended up reaching 12 star, if I'm not mistaken, so it is possible to reach, finally, be able to reach that 10+ stars in order to get 1 magic bonus on it. So if you haven't already done that, it might be worth considering opening some event keys. This kingdom does only have 1 mythic, and that mythic, of course, is Amnesia. Actually, one of the first mythics in the game. I believe it was 5th or 6th, somewhere around there. But yeah, she's really dated. They did buff her final trait a little bit, but still pretty underwhelming. She gives some stats to all daemons per turn, but it's extremely dated, even after it being buffed, and her mana accumulation is just really bad compared to what is currently available, especially for how high her mana cost is. It is nice that she can summon an Infernal King, but for how high of a cost it is, you're better off just using like a Arachne Weaver, and most of those instances has some color overlap as well. But overall, it's a pretty useless mythic, but you might want to consider it as getting a permanent +1 magic. If you can get 10 star plus onto Blighted Lands, is worth considering. And that's pretty much the only really relevant thing, is doing that. Some things that you might pick up for actually using are things like Hellcat, which is occasionally used for a red converter, though very rare in the current state of the game. Infernal King, which is probably the most viable single troop in this kingdom, mostly because of its double convert and the synergies that pretty much any double convert could potentially have. And Lamashtu, if you don't already have her. She's an epic as far as the Empower converters, but she's an Empower converter. A little bit of a weird one in that she denies her own color. She's a yellow that denies out yellow, which is a little bit weird, but she does get to do some damage to the weakest enemy, which is good for cleanup depending on what kind of team composition you have, but not as used as some of the other Empower converts out there. But those are pretty much the only 3 that really get used from this kingdom. Almost everything else from here is unfortunately dead content, or very near dead content that is almost never used, or so situational that you barely ever touch it. Anyways, other than that, but yeah, where is it? The Blighted Lands, yes, 12 star. It is possible to 12 star, and the most relevant part about that is 10 stars now possible, and 10 star gives us, of course, if we go under the kingdom level, which right here, a permanent +1 magic bonus. And also, we almost have enough purple deeds to go get another one on it. Definitely make sure to be spending all your writs, if you haven't already, onto purple deeds. You might be accumulating these slowly through a guild if you're doing some of these green tasks, or even slower off of adventure board. But you should always be converting these into purple, at least until all the purples are maxed. Then once all the purples are maxed, to probably go into Imperials. But at this given moment in time, until we have all 4 of the purple Magic Kingdoms max: Blighted Lands, Darkstone, Zolkari, and Blighted Lands, Darkstone, Karkaroth, and Silverglade. Once we get those 4 max, we then probably want to go into Imperials. I did mention Zolkari. Zolkari is a Magic Kingdom. Those are the 5 Magic Kingdoms. However, Zolkari uses green, not purple. The other 4 use purple, which is why it's such high priority to always convert your writs into purple, because you want to get those 4 to max, so you get a +1 magic, which is the strongest stat in the game to be able to get a +1 for. Anyways, in other news, let's go into raids. So with raids, we of course ended up getting a new weapon and a new troop. We're almost out of getting new troops for raids. Raids is one of those other events that is going to eventually be replaced with the World Lore event, which of course was the new event that ended up coming in with the most recent patch. So do be mindful of that raids, as we know it, kind of will not remain the same very, very soon. But as far as the weapon that we end up getting this week, we have this thing right over here. It's pretty useless, mostly because of Blighted Lands, lack of synergy, and lack of decent troops. But it has some damage. It's pretty standard double creation troop. It's boosted based on Blighted Lands, creates a mix of red and purple. We've been getting a really high amount of these weapons lately, and it's just another one for that collection. But it's okay. It's definitely towards the lower end of these, so not really have to go out of your way for it. However, if you do want to get it, I believe it's exactly 500 gems. So you do want to get that. Actually, is it 410 or 500? No, it's 410 for a raids event. My bad. But still, it's pretty cheap. Otherwise, you can get it in Soulforge for this week if you want to do it that way. And it's cheaper to craft it in Soulforge than it would be to craft it at a later time. So if you are getting it for completionist purposes, might want to consider it if you're not really bothering with the raid event itself that much. But it's probably better value just to get it through the raid event, which is some amount of gems. Anyways, as far as team, we're mostly running with this. It's basically a Inferno King team. It's based completely around triple damage skulls to burning, as well as Inferno King doing skull spam. So, of course, this troop has a rather interesting mechanic, and it has Pyromania, has the capability of doing 2 times the burning, but it also gets to burn all enemies after a cast. So this ends up synergizing pretty good with a raid event. Actually, probably one of the better synergy troops we've ever had, specifically for a raid event. So the way that you would normally play out this battle is you would go and throw your weapon all the way on the last slot. This will then activate burn. Ideally, you will have a hero class that has triple damage to burning. If you need to, depending on your level range, once you get deeper, you can also go and wait to cast Mang first off your hero, and then go for the poke, which will end up probably securing the kill in almost every instance. But that would also give you higher attack. But with triple damage to burning, we should almost be fine. Though maybe I shouldn't have done that, because this actual particular instance does have a little bit of a weird slot that does have 65% reduction. So it's going to be a little bit harder to break through, and for that reason, I'm just going to throw a random Mang here. I'm actually going to throw it on it, just because of its really high skull reduction. So he's still all of burn. Unfortunately, I don't believe we have a lineman. He has green to skull and brown to red, neither of which we seem to have. We also have yellow to purple, which also we don't seem to have. So that's a pretty unfortunate board right there. I guess we'll just take a red right over there and hope we can get a follow-up. Doesn't seem likely, though, with how things are going, so we'll take that for now. They unfortunately got unburned, but of course we can just go recast that to be able to get it on. We could also cast more Mangs if we necessarily need the damage, but a pretty unlucky board so far. Still no alignment, still no nothing to really use that we can kind of clear out the board with, so let's go for that for now. Trying to wait till he gives us something, as we'll get that skull over there, which unfortunately is not enough yet, but we do have split damage on the Inferno King, if we can end up getting them within kill range, which will end up poking them out depending on how much stats they currently have. But we can go for a skull right over there for free, get our poke, and that is pretty much match. If we had alignment here, we can actually just extra turn into the kill there, which doesn't seem like we have, so let's go and get a simple poke, kill out the Zugoff, and then kill it with either Mang or the other thing, or skull. Any of them would end up working. And that automatically hits the weakest, so you can easily use it up to clean up whatever you need. I generally set my banner to all in on yellow, so we can gain a little bit more yellow for Inferno King a bit quicker. However, do keep in mind that Lamashtu will deny out yellow, so I kind of use it as like a last resort kind of thing in order to refill. It's just we didn't have alignment for a good majority of that battle, so it didn't end up working out. A few things that you can do with this. There's 3 main hero classes that you might want to run. Hierophant, mainly because there's a lot of freeze this week, so I'm using that for the triple damage to burning with cleanse. Sun Spear, this gives perpetual red storm, as well as an entangle at start, and it also has triple damage to burning. And of course the classic Titan. Titan has Barrier every Brown, as well as the capability of being able to enrage, which will hit through a lot of these skull reductions that we have, like these wraiths with 65% skull reduction, which could be a little bit annoying, as you saw with that previous battle when using skull spam. Alternatively, you can also go monk. if you happen to have that maxed out. Also gains the benefit of having immune to freeze while still having barrier on brown. So any of those 4 options would work for hero class. I just specifically went out with Hierophant, but any of those would function for this event, depending on which way you want to go about it or which ones you actually have ready to go, because most of those do need to be level 100 to actually be usable in this kind of context. So do be mindful of that, particularly if you're using them for triple damage on burning, as they don't get that trait until level 100. However, something like Monk gets its immune to freeze pretty early, only at 5. So you could always just use Monk, and if you have it at 40, you can use barrier on brown plus that. And that would probably be one of the better ways to go, since out of all of those that I just mentioned, it requires it to be the lowest level to still be functional. You only need the 40 to get the freeze immune, as well as the barrier every brown, which would be pretty convenient. Anyways, in other news, other things that we have going on this week, a lot of things. So this Tuesday, today, we have ourselves the event for the, I'm going to say this wrong. I keep saying that this one is Werewoods. I keep messing up the 2 because their icon, I don't know, it's something about them. No, it's not Wild Court. It is Werewoods. I was confusing it the other way around last time. They're both the same color, so it didn't really matter too much. But a couple of weeks ago, I accidentally confused Wild Court with Werewoods. But every team I mentioned for them, other than Pure Faction, is relevant because they're both the same color restriction. So it ends up working out. But yes, this is Werewoods event. Probably a little bit more annoying one, mostly because of the transform mechanic. Particularly when trying to do Pure Faction. It can be a little bit annoying, but it's definitely doable. But anyways, we have ourselves the Werewoods faction. This Wednesday, we're going to be getting an Imp, which will be bringing in a Daemon bonus. So if you want that for a bunch of Daemons, unfortunately, Daemons do not have 50% mana start. They were pretty meta a couple years back, but these days they have pretty much completely fallen off a cliff as far as like pure Daemon teams. Obviously, there's a few Daemons that are still viable within the game, but as far as Daemon-based teams, they're pretty much non-existent in the current state of the game. This Thursday is pretty much one of the worst hero classes in the game, Diabolist. However, since it's the worst, a lot of people probably don't have it leveled, so you can go get some class XP for it if you haven't already gotten it maxed. And of course, Friday, as I mentioned, we have Bounty Hunter, which will be bringing yet again another Blighted Lands troop, which will bring it to 13-star Blighted Lands once we get around to that. But yeah, which is pretty good to go get. And also this Friday, we're going to be getting a new Mythic, which is actually pretty decent. You'll be able to get that in Glory Gem Guild and VIP chests. It's going to be the second Mythic in the game with the capability of extra turning. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. It's kind of like a Furnace and Aquaticus and like that, in that it has a bit of board control. It has a lot of split damage where it does, or it hits something directly and then does adjacent damage with that splash damage. Has 1 to 4 potential things with that. And it has a 4x enchant, which will be interesting since enchant gives 2 mana to all allies per turn and can end up accumulating a lot of mana. And that combined with its extra turn capability does make the upcoming Mythic this Friday a pretty viable specimen. We don't know exactly how well it will actually function, but based on what it seems like on paper, it has potential of being up there, possibly even top 10, but we'll kind of have to do some testing on it this Friday and see where it falls. Other than that, as far as mythics that already exist that are worth crafting, there are a few of them in Soulforge right now. As far as absolute power, I would say Umanif is the best thing to craft this week, mostly because of its final trait, being able to gain a bunch of additional attack combined with its Hunter's Mark. This makes it a rather good Skull Poker. It's kind of like a Zugoff if you can't afford Zugoff, is basically what Umanif is. It's the Zugoff if you don't own Zugoff. It has a very similar ability to that of Zugoff with a boost ratio too, so it can scale up. It doesn't get automatic instant kill, but it does generally kill with its ability, and it gets some skulls similar to how Zugoff does. And on top of that, it has dodge, it has 2x skull damage up to most things, and it has an attack gain, which synergizes really well with that 2x damage that it has. And overall, it's pretty decent. If you have Web Spinner, you can pretty much do most of what this thing can, and if you have Zugoff, you can do pretty much everything that this thing can for the most part. So it's not excessively sought after, but it's still a great damage source alternative. Other than that, Aryali, while it's not used for much, it can occasionally be used in true damage teams. However, its main purpose is its 4x poison. Even though this is a rather useless final trait, it is very useful in one particular instance, and that is Scorpius. Scorpius, to my understanding and from my experience, is still the strongest thing to run Explore 12 with as far as overall speed, specifically in the Urskaya Kingdom. So if you've been looking to get a proper poison for that rather than using Shadow Dragon or Web Spinner or similar, that actually has a 4x poison as well, this is something that you might want to consider picking up, as it is quicker to run it with Aryali compared to something like Shadow Dragon. Not too big of a time difference, but it definitely does speed it up, so worth considering if you want to do a lot of Explore 12 to do trait stone farming. Keep in mind, she'll be pretty useless once that's not meta anymore. However, it's been meta for like 5 months now, so it might stay that way for a little while. It already has for about 5 months, so it might still keep going that way, but we have no clue when she will not be viable. But at this current moment in time, she is, so worth considering. Anyways, other than that, if you're a little bit earlier in the game and you're looking for something to craft, Tesla is one of the few legends that is worth crafting. Generally, I would not advise crafting legends, as you'll have every legend in the game way before you have every mythic. However, Tesla is one of those few exceptions. Tesla has a really high amount of true damage scatter that upscales. Its boost ratios at a 4-to-1 boost ratio off of every single armor in the battle. So this ends up getting a lot of boost ratio, and it gets the boost ratio off the enemy too. So if they have higher stats, well, you'll be doing higher true damage. And yeah, you can normally get a kill in about a few casts of her. Ideally, you want a 2-cast her, but sometimes 3 or 4. And yeah, she get upscaled to pretty much any stats. Doesn't matter if they have 1,000. She'll still boost ratio off of all that armor that they have and win in about the same amount of time, regardless of their stats. So really good if you don't have a proper upscaling option yet and you want one. Definitely worth considering. She's also used in some true damage related teams, as she has a really high amount of true damage, particularly with Tina 9000. However, there are other alternatives to use her with. Pretty much any true damage team could theoretically use her, but particularly true damage that also gains armor are some of the best that end up using her, particularly mech, since her final trait does end up assisting mech some. However, overall, she's mostly used for her ability, of course, rather than any other aspect of her. But that's worth considering. As far as weapons, nothing is actually worth going out of your way for. However, there are some things for collecting. There's 4 things available. Well, technically 3. One of them is only available today. Beastly Claw is only available for today, so if you want to go and get Beastly Claw, it is only available during this Tuesday faction event, and then it'll be like months before you can get it again. However, it is a completely useless weapon, but if you're looking for it for completion, it is here. Other than that, we have the Soul Ripper, which is the one that you get through raids. It is advised getting it through raids and not through Soulforge. However, if you do get it through Soulforge, as you can see, it is slightly cheaper to get it this week through Soulforge than it would be into the future, because these numbers would be 600, that would be 300, and the souls would be 15,000, and the Celestial would be 3 instead of 2. So it will be an increased cost into the future if you don't get it this week. However, it is advised getting off our raids and not getting in Soulforge, but if you want to, it is here for cheaper. Other than that, we also got Deathspire. Deathspire is not worth it. They kind of made it to be an evasion weapon. However, its boost ratio, by the time there's even 4 towers, isn't even worth it. That boost ratio would have to be like 20 or 30 or way higher than it is to actually be viable. And since this thing can only be used in invasions and it's not even viable for invasions, it's just completely dead content. You only get it for completionist purposes, and this is the last thing you'd bother getting, even prior to this. And this is just a super cheap weapon if you just need another weapon to upgrade the kingdom. In order to have a certain amount of weapons for a requirement, it is an epic weapon for the kingdom. It doesn't really do too much of relevance. However, it is super cheap as far as its actual cost. And those are the 4 things that are available this week. All useless, all only obtained for completionist purposes. So do be mindful of that. So good week to go skip all of them if you so choose, if you're not trying to get everything in the game, as they are all not worth getting. Other than that, let's just go over a few teams real quick throughout the week. Let's see. And of course, we'll be going over the Mythic in great detail once it actually ends up coming out. But I just want to go over these 5 teams. So, for raids, this I kind of already went over when we did the battle, but Mang, Lucifiria, Infernal King, and Lamashtu. And basically, we're just running this into a Mang-oriented team, where you go Mang into poking the raid boss, into Skull Spam. You can also just simply go straight into the raid boss kill and then go for Skull Spam, depending on the team that you're up against, depending on if they have armor reduction or if you have Enrage or what the team composition is like. But once you get to later ones, you're definitely going to want to do a Mang first. As far as the Delve, you can end up using the same ones that we mentioned a couple weeks ago, but I figured I'd change it up just ever so slightly just to not show the same teams over and over again. Of course, this one is a Truffle team. If you really wanted to, you could try it with Queen Beatrix too. Queen Beatrix would be viable for this if you want to go and mess around with it, but personally I do prefer King Gobtruffle much over Beatrix. But if you want to, it's the exact same thing with double Beatrix would work for this team, with the Leprechaun feeding it up as your mana generation board clear, so could do it that way if you so choose. Other than that, as far as a lower, cheaper team, of course, kind of the standard, just an Urskaya shield into Rowanne followed by mana accumulation, always a great option. You can replace out a Leprechaun for something else if you so choose, but a double Leprechaun is just a little bit cheaper since you only have to trade up one of them and level up one of them, and as long as you have 2 copies of it, you can run 2 of them onto your team, and you basically just do that for an empowered mana accumulation. Of course, he has empower into a really massive mana, and he ends up gaining you a little bit of extra gold on top of it all, and of course, you just use Urskaya shield into Rowanne and be good to go. Rowanne you get for free from Forest of Thorns Kingdom, Urskaya shield you get for free from 250 wins on Sentinel hero class. Sentinel hero class you get from completing out the Urskaya Kingdom. It's all easy to obtain things. The only thing that's really random is getting the 2 Leprechauns, but it's a low enough rarity that you would most likely get it after about a month or less of playing the game. Other than that, Werewoods Pure Faction. This is, of course, one of the more recent factions that came into the game a couple months ago. And as far as its gimmick, it mostly has a bunch of transforming, which could be a little bit annoying. Basically, how you play this team is you want to make sure the Werebeast does not cast. You want to use its 20% score reduction combined with the partial gain of the 25% score reduction that you get from potions in order to tank it out. And don't cast this because it is the tankiest thing that you're going to have. So you kind of want to use it as your tank and only cast it on the final battle because you want it to remain your tank all the way until the final battle. We run double Werecat because it can end up doing a bunch of mana accumulation, and it can also go back to Torbern. All of them can go back to Torbern other than Torbern himself. He also has a bit of skull dodge, but he's mostly used for his potential mana accumulation that he can end up doing and his triple damage. Other than that, we also have Beastmaster. Beastmaster is pretty much the main gimmick of this place, where all of them transform into him, and he transforms into one of them. You actually want to cast this very minimally. However, you do want to take it as your kills. However, you ideally want to do your Werecats as your thing, and then have your Werecats become Beastmasters, and then have your Beastmasters that were Werecats then become something else. However, you can end up casting your Beastmaster. You always want to make sure you have at least one on your team if you can help it. It's kind of weird because generally, as you're going through this delve, your entire team composition will just keep changing throughout the entire delve, but the main consistent you want to make sure is Werebear stays in first slot, and that you start with at least one Werecat and at least one Beastmaster. But aside from that, you can pretty much do whatever, because your team by the end of the delve, as long as Werebear is in first slot, will be completely different than this. It could be 3 completely different troops. It might not even be any of these 2 troops, depending on how unlucky you get. But ideally, you do want to enter the final battle with at least one Werecat and one Beastmaster, and Werebear in first slot. As long as you can do that, you could probably win out Pure Faction, as long as you have the stats to do so. And that's pretty much the strategy for that. And as far as Diabolist Hero Class event, you can run a pretty similar team to whatever the raid event is, because it actually has the exact same restrictions for the most part. The only difference is, whereas the raid event is just a Daemon restriction, this one is Daemon plus, while the other one is Blighted Lands restriction for raids, this one is Blighted Lands plus Daemon. However, almost the entire kingdom is Daemon anyways, so it's pretty much no difference as far as restriction. But yeah, you basically just use Lamashtu, fill up your mana, kind of Infernal King skull spam. You could do it off of Enrage. You can also go down Dawnbringer route if you want. You could do Dawnbringer to triple Lamashtu if you're just doing the free battles. But if you're going deeper, you probably want to go use the Infernal King there, have skull spam, have Lamashtu fill it, and basically just skull spam it down very quickly. And that's basically all the teams. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave in the comment section below. Of course, we'll be going over the new Mythic and Bounty Hunter this Friday, when they both end up releasing. And I do advise going for this new Mythic. Any Glory Gem Guild or VIP keys that you get throughout the week, you probably want to save, as this next upcoming Mythic this Friday is pretty decent to go for. Has potential to be one of the better Mythics in the game, and we'll be testing around with it once it comes out to see exactly what it can end up doing. But anyways, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Stay safe from the virus, and I will catch you guys very, very soon. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you so much for watching.